My name is Serafina Matthews, 28, and I never imagined my family's Sunday dinner would end with my parents giving me 48 hours to vacate my childhood home. Their cold stares pierced through me as they declared I was no longer their daughter. What could possibly warrant such a severe punishment? The answer lies in a family secret I uncovered, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty and turn my entire world upside down. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into how my family tried to destroy me, and how karma came full circle, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if my family drama resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this family revenge saga unfolds. Growing up in suburban Boston, the Matthews family was the envy of the neighborhood. My father, Richard, was a respected surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, while my mother, Eleanor, ran a successful interior design business. My older brother, James, followed in our father's footsteps, becoming a promising medical resident. As for me, I chose a different path, pursuing my passion for investigative journalism. The Matthews have it all figured out, our neighbors would say, admiring our manicured lawn and the perfect family portraits that adorned our walls. Every Sunday without fail we gathered for an elaborate family dinner, a tradition my mother insisted upon to maintain our image of familial harmony. The cracks in our perfect family facade began to form when I landed my dream job at the Boston Investigator, a renowned publication known for exposing corruption and uncovering buried truths. My parents' enthusiasm was noticeably muted compared to when James announced his medical school acceptance. Journalism is such an unstable profession, my mother would say with a tight smile. Wouldn't you rather pursue something more respectable? Their lukewarm support stung, but I was determined to prove myself. My first major assignment came 6 months into the job, investigating financial fraud at several prestigious Boston hospitals. The investigation required months of meticulous research, confidential interviews, and document analysis. Little did I know that this investigation would lead me down a path that would unravel my own family's carefully constructed lies. The deeper I dug into the hospital fraud case, the more anxious my father became about my work. At first I attributed his discomfort to concern for my safety investigating powerful institutions. Our Sunday dinners grew increasingly tense, with my father changing the subject whenever I brought up my progress. I'd rather not discuss work matters at the dinner table, Serafina, he would say firmly. Family time should be sacred. One evening, while working late at the office, I received an anonymous email containing encrypted hospital financial records. As I decrypted and analyzed the documents, a familiar name jumped out at me, my father's. According to these records, Dr. Richard Matthews had been accepting substantial kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies for prescribing certain medications and had been involved in falsifying insurance claims. My blood ran cold as I stared at the screen. This couldn't be right. My father, the paragon of medical ethics, the man who lectured me about integrity and honesty throughout my childhood, was potentially involved in fraud that endangered patients and cost taxpayers millions. I needed more evidence before jumping to conclusions. Over the next 2 weeks, I discreetly gathered additional information, cross-referencing documents and speaking with anonymous sources within the hospital system. Each new piece of evidence only confirmed my worst fears. My father was indeed at the center of this scandal. The weight of this knowledge crushed me. How could I possibly expose my own father? Yet how could I, as a journalist committed to truth, bury such a significant story? The ethical dilemma kept me awake night after night. I decided to confront my father privately before making any decisions about the story. Perhaps there was an explanation, a misunderstanding I hadn't considered. I chose to speak with him after our Sunday dinner, when the house would be quiet and we could have privacy. That Sunday I picked at my food, barely participating in the family conversation. My mother noticed my unusual silence. "Serafina, dear, are you feeling all right?" "You've hardly touched your roast beef," she remarked, concern in her voice. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired from work," I replied, avoiding my father's gaze. After dinner, as my mother and James cleared the table, I asked my father to join me in his study. The heavy oak door closed behind us with a sense of finality. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important." I began, my voice trembling slightly. My father settled into his leather chair, looking relaxed and unaware of what was coming. "What is it, sweetheart? Problems at work?" I took a deep breath and placed the folder of evidence on his desk. "I'm working on an investigation about hospital fraud. Your name appears repeatedly in these documents." The color drained from his face as he flipped through the pages. His hands shook slightly, a gesture I'd never seen from my surgeon father with his legendary steady hands. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, his voice turning cold. "That doesn't matter, Dad. What matters is whether they're true. Are you involved in this fraud scheme?" My father's face transformed before my eyes. The warm, loving dad I knew disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger. He closed the folder slowly, deliberately, then leaned back in his chair. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Serafina," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "This is far bigger than you can imagine. Answer the question, Dad. Are these documents accurate?" I pressed, my journalist instincts taking over despite the emotional turmoil inside me. He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "The medical system is complicated. There are arrangements, understandings between hospitals, doctors, and pharmaceutical companies that keep everything functioning. What you call fraud is simply how things work." His casual dismissal of ethical violations shocked me. "People trust you with their lives, Dad. You're overcharging for procedures, accepting kickbacks for prescribing medications that might not be in patients' best interests." "Don't be so naive," he snapped, slamming his palm on the desk. "Do you think hospitals run on goodwill? Your mother's business, your brother's education, this house, all of it is possible because I understand how the system works." The study door opened, and my mother stepped in, her expression concerned. "What's going on? I can hear you from the kitchen." My father stood up, pushing the folder toward her. "Your daughter is investigating me for her newspaper. Apparently her career is more important than family loyalty." My mother scanned the documents, her face hardening with each page. When she looked up, her eyes were ice cold. "How could you, Serafina? Your own father, Mom. This isn't about loyalty. It's about truth. Dad is involved in something illegal and potentially dangerous for patients," I explained desperately, hoping she would understand. Instead, she laughed bitterly. "Truth? You think the world runs on truth? It runs on appearances, connections, and knowing when to look the other way." My brother James appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. "What's happening?" My father handed him the folder. "Your sister has decided to destroy this family for a headline." James looked through the documents, his medical training allowing him to understand the implications immediately. But instead of showing shock or disappointment in our father, he glared at me. "You've always been jealous of Dad's success," he accused. "You couldn't follow in his footsteps, so you decided to tear him down instead." "This isn't about jealousy," I protested. "This is about right and wrong. People could be getting harmful medications because of these kickback schemes." "Always so self-righteous," my mother sneered, "while enjoying all the privileges your father's career has provided." The three of them stood united against me, a wall of familial betrayal that knocked the wind out of me. I had expected shock, perhaps denial, but not this collective defense of corruption. "So all three of you know about this?" I asked, the realization dawning on me. "You're all complicit. Family protects its own," my father stated firmly. "Something you clearly never learned." "James is building his career at Mass General," my mother added. "Did you even consider how your little exposé would affect his future?" I looked at my brother, who had always been my childhood defender. "You knew about this too, James. You're part of it." He had the decency to look somewhat ashamed. "I learned about certain arrangements when I started my residency." It's just how medicine works, Sarah. It's not black and white. What are you going to do with this information? My father demanded. The question hung heavy in the air. What was I going to do? Expose my own family and destroy everything they had built? Or compromise my journalistic integrity and become complicit in their corruption? I don't know yet, I admitted honestly. But I can't just ignore it. My father's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice. He turned to my mother. Eleanor, call Charles. Charles? Your lawyer? I asked, confused. My mother was already dialing on her cell phone. We need to contain this situation. Within an hour, Charles Whitman, my father's longtime attorney and family friend, arrived at our house. The five of us sat in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Here's how this will proceed, Charles began without preamble. Serafina, you will sign this non-disclosure agreement, promising never to use any information about your father's professional activities in any publication or investigation. He slid a thick document across the coffee table toward me. And if I refuse, I asked, already knowing the answer. My father leaned forward. If you refuse, we will sue your newspaper for defamation. Charles has prepared a statement claiming you fabricated evidence due to personal grievances. We'll destroy your career before it even begins. You wouldn't, I whispered, looking from face to face, searching for any sign of the family I thought I knew. We would, my mother confirmed coldly. And that's not all. Sign the NDA, or consider yourself cut off from this family, financially, emotionally, completely. My brother looked uncomfortable but remained silent, tacitly supporting their ultimatum. You're asking me to choose between my principles and my family, I said, my voice breaking. No, my father corrected. We're telling you that if you choose your principles over your family, you no longer have a family. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence that followed my father's ultimatum. Outside, through the bay windows, I could see darkness had fallen, completely mirroring the shadows that had descended on what I thought was a loving family. I need time to think, I finally said, standing up from the couch. You have until Tuesday evening, my father declared. 48 hours to make your decision and sign the NDA. After that, we proceed with our counteraction. I stumbled out of the living room in a daze, climbing the stairs to my childhood bedroom. The pink walls and softball trophies felt like relics from someone else's life. I collapsed onto the bed, my mind racing. Could I really expose my own father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night helping me with science projects, who had beamed with pride at my high school graduation? The complicated feelings of love, betrayal, and moral obligation warred within me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my editor at the Boston Investigator, update on hospital story, getting pressure from upstairs to see progress. I stared at the message, unable to formulate a response. How could I explain that the key figure in our investigation was my own father? That my family was threatening to destroy my career and disown me if I pursued the truth? Around midnight, a soft knock came at my door. I opened it to find James standing there, looking conflicted. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I let him in, and we sat side by side on my bed, like we used to do as kids when sharing secrets. "You know they're serious, right?" James began. "Dad and Mom will follow through on everything they threatened." "I know," I whispered. "But James, what Dad is doing is wrong. People could be getting hurt." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's more complicated than that, Sarah. The pharmaceutical arrangements. Everyone does it. And the insurance billing. Yes, it's technically fraud, but it's also how hospitals stay afloat with declining reimbursements. That doesn't make it right," I insisted. "No, it doesn't," he surprisingly agreed. "But is exposing Dad worth losing your family? Worth destroying Mom's business by association? Worth damaging my career before it's even started?" I looked at my brother, always the pragmatist, always the favorite. "Would you do it?" "If you were in my position," James was silent for a long moment. "I'd probably sign the NDA," he finally admitted. Family comes first, even when family is wrong, especially then, he said. No one's perfect, Sarah. Dad's done some questionable things professionally, but he's still the man who raised us, who put me through med school, who supports Mom in everything she does. After James left, I lay awake all night staring at the ceiling. By morning, I was exhausted but clear-headed. I knew what I had to do. At breakfast, the atmosphere was frigid. My parents barely acknowledged my presence, speaking only to James. I picked up my toast, gathering courage for what I needed to say. "I've made my decision," I announced. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. "That was quick," my father remarked coldly. "Charles won't be available until this evening to witness your signature." "I'm not signing the NDA," I stated firmly. My mother's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Then you know the consequences." "I do," I replied, "but I'm also not publishing the story." My father frowned in confusion. "Explain." "I'm recusing myself from the investigation due to conflict of interest. I'll tell my editor that I discovered a personal connection that makes it inappropriate for me to continue." "The paper will assign someone else. And you think that solves anything?" my father scoffed. "Another reporter will just pick up where you left off." "Probably," I acknowledged. "But it won't be me betraying my family. And it won't be me compromising my journalistic integrity either. I'm removing myself from the equation." "That's not good enough," my mother snapped. "You need to actively stop this investigation." I shook my head. "I can't do that. It would be professional suicide. All I can do is step aside." "Then you're still choosing your career over your family," my father concluded. "No," I corrected him. "I'm refusing to choose. I won't betray either side of myself." My father stood up from the table, his face flushed with anger. "Unacceptable. You either actively protect this family or you're no longer part of it. You have until Tuesday evening to change your mind." With that, he stormed out, my mother following close behind. James lingered, giving me a look that mingled pity with disappointment before leaving as well. That afternoon, I met with Marcus at a coffee shop far from my usual haunts. His expression grew increasingly concerned as I explained that I needed to remove myself from the hospital fraud investigation. "This is your breakthrough story, Serafina," he protested. "You've been working on it for months." "I know," I said, "but I've discovered a personal connection that creates a serious conflict of interest. Ethically, I have to step away." Marcus studied my face. "This is about your father, isn't it, Doctor?" "Matthews at Mass General." I stared at him, stunned. "You knew I suspected. The way you reacted when his name first appeared in the documents. I've been in this business a long time, Serafina. I know when someone's personally affected by a story." "Why didn't you say anything? I wanted to see what you would do," he admitted. "It was a test of your journalistic integrity, and for what it's worth, you're passing with flying colors." His words should have been comforting, but they only added to my sense of loss. My professional integrity was intact, but at what personal cost? "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll assign someone else to the investigation," Marcus said. "But Serafina, you should know. This story is going to break with or without your involvement, and when it does, your family is going to assume you were behind it anyway." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. In trying to find a middle path, I might end up with the worst of both worlds: professional limitation and family estrangement. The next morning, I woke to an email from an unfamiliar address, e.blackwell@massgeneral.org. The subject line read simply, "Regarding Dr. Matthews." My finger hovered over the delete button. I had removed myself from the investigation after all. But curiosity won out. I opened the message. "Miss Matthews, my name is Dr. Eliza Blackwell, Chief of Internal Medicine at Mass General. I understand you've been investigating financial irregularities at our hospital. I have information regarding your father that may interest you. If you're willing to meet, I'll be at Riverside Park near the old boathouse at 2 p.m. today. Come alone." I read the message 3 times, trying to decide if it was legitimate or a trap set by my father. Dr. Blackwell was indeed the chief of internal medicine. I had come across her name during my research. But why would someone of her stature risk meeting with a journalist? After much deliberation, I decided to go. If nothing else, I could explain that I was no longer on the story and suggest she contact my replacement. Riverside Park was busy with weekend visitors enjoying the warm spring day. Families picnicked on the grass, couples strolled hand in hand, and joggers weaved through the crowds. I spotted an elegant older woman sitting alone on a bench near the boathouse, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Dr. Blackwell, I approached cautiously. She looked up, studying me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Miss Matthews, you have your father's jawline, but thankfully your mother's sense of discretion. Please sit." I joined her on the bench, maintaining some distance. "I should tell you I'm no longer working on the hospital investigation. Because of your father," she stated rather than asked. I suspected as much when I learned Richard Matthews' daughter was the journalist behind the investigation. "How do you know who I am? Boston is smaller than you think, especially in medical circles," she replied. "Richard has mentioned his journalist daughter with both pride and concern over the years." I felt a pang at the thought of my father speaking about me with pride. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. "Why did you want to meet with me?" I asked, getting to the point. Dr. Blackwell gazed out at the water. "I've been at Mass General for 35 years. I've seen administrations come and go, policies change, and yes, ethical standards fluctuate. Your father and I were residents together. Did you know that?" I shook my head. "Richard was brilliant, dedicated. He still is. But somewhere along the way he started making compromises." She turned to face me directly. "The pharmaceutical kickbacks you uncovered are just the tip of the iceberg, Miss Matthews." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, I began noticing patterns in patient outcomes in your father's department. Surgical complications that shouldn't have happened, unexpected, adverse reactions to medications, unusually high readmission rates. When I investigated, I found connections to specific treatment protocols that had been implemented. Protocols tied to pharmaceutical companies that were paying your father as a consultant. I felt sick. "Are you saying patients were harmed?" "Yes," she said bluntly. "I brought my concerns to the hospital board, but your father has powerful allies. The investigation was buried. Since then I've been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And you think that moment is now, because of my investigation?" "Precisely. When I heard a Boston investigator journalist was looking into hospital fraud, I hoped it might finally bring these issues to light. Then I learned the journalist was Richard's daughter." She smiled sadly. "Life has a strange sense of irony." I shook my head, trying to process this new information. "I've recused myself from the story. Another reporter will take over. And will this reporter have access to all your sources, all your documents, the connections you've made?" Dr. Blackwell pressed. I'm not sure," I admitted. The truth was, much of what I had uncovered came from my own intuition and personal knowledge, advantages another reporter wouldn't have. "Miss Matthews, I understand your dilemma. Family loyalty is powerful. But this is no longer just about financial fraud. People have been hurt, some permanently, because of these arrangements." She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "This contains patient records, anonymized to protect privacy, showing the correlation between your father's pharmaceutical arrangements and adverse patient outcomes. I'm giving you a copy, but I've also sent one to the Massachusetts Medical Board and the FDA." I stared at the flash drive but didn't take it. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I took an oath to do no harm," she said simply. "And because Richard was once my friend. I've tried to reason with him privately for years. He needs to be stopped before his legacy becomes one of harm rather than healing." "Have you spoken with my father about coming forward?" "I tried one last time yesterday. He threatened to destroy my career if I pursued it further." Her mouth tightened. Richard doesn't realize that at my age, with retirement on the horizon, such threats hold little power. Reluctantly, I took the flash drive. I don't know what you expect me to do with this. Whatever your conscience dictates, Doctor, Blackwell said, standing up. But know this, with or without your involvement, this story will break within the week. The medical board investigation alone will ensure that. I thought you deserved to hear it from me first, given what's at stake for your family. As she walked away, I called after her, Doctor. Blackwell, why didn't you go public years ago? She paused, looking back at me with an expression of profound regret. The same reason you're struggling now, Miss Matthews. Loyalty. Richard was my friend. I kept hoping he would correct course on his own. Everything. Financial fraud was one thing. Deplorable but somewhat abstract. Actual patient harm was concrete, unambiguous, and impossible to rationalize away. By the time I left the park, darkness was falling and I had missed 3 calls from my brother. I returned his call as I walked to the subway. "Where have you been?" James demanded. "Mom and Dad are furious. They expected you home for dinner to discuss the NDA. I needed some space to think, I replied, not ready to tell him about Dr. Blackwell. Well, they've moved up the deadline, right? Dad says you have until tomorrow morning to sign, and you need to get your things in lieu. James, I said carefully, what would you do if you found out Dad's arrangements with pharmaceutical companies had resulted in patient harm? There was a long silence on the other end. What are you talking about? Just answer the question. As a doctor, what would your ethical obligation be? Patient safety comes first, he said automatically, then quickly added, but that's a hypothetical that doesn't apply here. Dad's arrangements are financial, not clinical. Are you sure about that? I pressed. Another pause. Sarah, what do you know that I don't? I'm not sure yet, I hedged. But I need you to think carefully about where you stand if things get worse. You're scaring me, he admitted. Just come home. We'll figure this out as a family. Family. The word that once brought comfort now felt like a trap. I thought about my parents waiting at home, ready to force me into silence with threats and ultimatums. I thought about Dr. Blackwell's patient records and the harm that had apparently been done. I thought about my own principles and the journalist I had worked so hard to become. As I rode the subway home, I made my decision. Tomorrow would change everything. For me, for my family, and for the patients who deserved the truth. I've been standing at this crossroads between family loyalty and moral integrity, and I know many of you have faced similar impossible choices. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment below if you've ever had to choose between loyalty and doing what's right. Hit that like button if you're invested in how this family drama unfolds, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. The next part of this story will show you exactly how karma works when family betrayal meets justice. When I arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. The dining room, usually set immaculately for Sunday dinner, was empty. I found my mother in the kitchen aggressively chopping vegetables. Emergency surgery, she replied without looking up. Unlike some people in this family, your father takes his professional responsibilities seriously. I ignored the bell. And Jane's own call at the hospital. She finally looked up her knife, paused mid-chop. The NDA is on your father's desk. He expects it signed by morning. Mom, I said gently, have you ever considered that Dad might have crossed lines that go beyond bending financial rules? Her chopping resumed, more forceful than before. Your father has dedicated his life to saving people. Everything he does is in service to that mission, even if it means harming some patients to benefit others. The knife clattered onto the cutting board. What exactly are you implying? I chose my words carefully. I've received information suggesting Dad's pharmaceutical arrangements may have influenced his treatment decisions in ways that led to patient complications. My mother's face flushed with anger. From whom? Some jealous colleague, a disgruntled patient. Your father is the best surgeon in Boston. The source is credible, I insisted. And there are records. Records can be manipulated, context removed, she dismissed. You of all people should know how easy it is to construct a false narrative. Mom, I'm trying to understand the full picture before I make any decisions. Don't you think we should at least consider the possibility? No, she snapped. I've stood by your father for 30 years. I've watched him save countless lives, work himself to exhaustion for his patients. Whatever you think, you know you're wrong. I realized then that my mother's defense of my father went beyond family loyalty. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being the supportive wife of the brilliant surgeon. Accepting any flaw in him would require reconsidering her own life choices. I'm going to my room, I said, retreating from the conversation. The NDA, Serafina, she reminded me coldly. By morning. In my bedroom, I locked the door and pulled out Dr. Blackwell's flash drive. For hours, I pored over the patient records she had provided. The evidence was damning. Over the past 5 years, patients receiving certain treatment protocols connected to pharmaceutical companies paying my father, had experienced complication rates significantly higher than the hospital average. Even more disturbing were internal emails showing my father had dismissed concerns raised by other doctors about these complications. By 2 a.m. I had reached an inescapable conclusion: my father had knowingly continued treatments that put patients at risk because of financial incentives. The man who had taught me right from wrong had betrayed not just his oath but the fundamental principle of medicine: first do no harm. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the quiet suburban street below. The decision before me was no longer a choice between family loyalty and professional integrity. It was a moral obligation to prevent further harm. With shaking hands, I drafted 2 emails. The first was to Marcus, explaining that new information had come to light that made the hospital fraud story even more significant, and that I wanted to rejoin the investigation. The second was to Dr. Blackwell, thanking her for her courage and asking for a meeting to discuss next steps. As dawn broke, I heard movement in the house, my father returning from his night at the hospital. I tucked the flash drive into my pocket and went downstairs to confront him. He was in the kitchen making coffee, still in his surgical scrubs. He looked exhausted but satisfied, the expression of a surgeon after a successful operation. "Dad," I said from the doorway. He looked up, his expression hardening as he saw me. "The NDA, Serafina. Have you signed it?" "No, and I won't be signing it." He sighed heavily. "Then I suggest you start packing. You have until this evening to leave." "I met with Dr. Blackwell yesterday," I said, watching his face carefully. The coffee mug in his hand stilled halfway to his lips. A flicker of something, fear, crossed his features before he controlled it. "Eliza always did have a talent for melodrama," he said dismissively. "Whatever she told you is exaggerated at best, fabricated at worst. She gave me patient records, Dad. Evidence that your pharmaceutical arrangements affected your clinical decisions. Patients were harmed." My father set down his coffee mug with deliberate calm. "Medicine involves risks, Serafina. Every treatment has potential side effects. What appears to a layperson as harm is often just the statistical reality of medical intervention." "Don't patronize me," I said. "The records show a clear pattern of complications connected specifically to treatments from companies paying you, and they show you ignored warnings from other doctors." For the first time, I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes. "What exactly do you intend to do?" "I'm rejoining the investigation," I told him. "But more importantly, Doctor, Blackwell has already sent the evidence to the medical board and the FDA. This isn't just about my story anymore, Dad. There will be official investigations." My father's face drained of color. He braced himself against the counter, suddenly looking much older than his 60 years. "You don't understand what you're doing," he whispered. "This will destroy everything. My career, our family's reputation, James's future. You did that, Dad." "Not me. Every time you chose money over patient safety, you built this outcome." My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, alarmed by our intense conversation. "Richard, what's happening?" Before my father could respond, his phone rang. He checked the caller ID and visibly paled. "It's Charles," he said to my mother. "The hospital lawyer is also on the call." As my father took the call in his study, my mother rounded on me. "What have you done?" "Nothing yet," I said honestly. But others have started to ask the same questions I did. Minutes later, my father emerged from his study, his face ashen. "The medical board has opened a formal investigation. The hospital is distancing itself. They've suspended my surgical privileges pending the outcome." My mother gasped. "They can't do that. After everything you've contributed to that hospital, they can and they have." My father collapsed into a kitchen chair. "Charles says it's serious. There are patient complaints coming forward now, complications that were previously attributed to standard risk but are being re-examined." "This is your fault," my mother spat at me. "Your father has saved thousands of lives, and you're destroying him over some technical violations." "Patient harm isn't a technical violation, Mom," I said firmly. "It's the worst thing a doctor can do." My father looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something new in his eyes. "Shame. I never meant for anyone to get hurt," he said quietly. "It started small, just promoting certain medications that worked well anyway. Then, it grew. The payments got bigger, the expectations more specific. Before I knew it, you could have stopped at any time," I pointed out. "It's not that simple when you're in that deep," he said. "The lifestyle, the reputation, your brother's education, your mother's business connections through the hospital, it was all interconnected." My mother sat beside him, taking his hand. "We'll fight this, Richard. Charles will find a way." My father shook his head slowly. "There are records, Eleanor. Patient outcomes. Eliza has been documenting this for years, apparently." He looked at me. "Your doctor. Blackwell was once my mentor. Did you know that? She warned me years ago that I was heading down a dangerous path." The revelation surprised me. She didn't mention that. She wouldn't. "Eliza has always been discreet. Until now, it seems." He sighed deeply. "The irony is, I actually believed I was helping more patients than I was hurting." The research funding those pharmaceutical relationships brought in, it allowed for innovations that helped countless people. "That doesn't justify the harm, Dad." "No," he agreed unexpectedly. "It doesn't. I see that now, too late." My mother looked between us, confused by my father's sudden capitulation. "Richard, you can't be serious. We need to fight this." "To what end, Eleanor?" he asked wearily. "The evidence is there. Fighting will only drag out the inevitable and cost us what little dignity we have left." The next 48 hours unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. By Monday afternoon, news of my father's suspension had spread through Boston's medical community. By Tuesday morning, the Boston Globe had picked up the story, running a front-page headline: "Prestigious Mass General Surgeon under investigation for patient harm." My brother James called me, his voice raw with emotion. "Did you know the hospital has suspended me too, pending investigation into how much I knew about Dad's practices?" Guilt twisted in my stomach. "I'm so sorry, James. I never meant for you to get caught up in this." "But you knew it would happen," he said bitterly. "You knew the fallout wouldn't be contained to just Dad." "What was I supposed to do?" I asked. Patients were being harmed. There was a long pause before James sighed. "The worst part is I did know something wasn't right. Not the full extent, but enough that I should have asked more questions. I didn't want to see it." His admission surprised me. "What will you do now? I don't know. If I'm cleared, maybe transfer to another hospital. Start over somewhere my last name isn't associated with scandal. His voice hardened. Mom's a wreck, by the way. Her design clients are already canceling contracts. The dominoes were falling exactly as my parents had predicted. Our entire family was being swept up in the scandal. Yet despite the guilt, I felt I couldn't regret bringing the truth to light. That afternoon I met with Marcus and the editorial team at the Boston Investigator. The conference room was packed. What had started as my investigation had grown into the biggest story the paper had seen in years. The medical board has expanded their investigation to 3 other doctors at Mass General, Marcus announced. Apparently your father's arrangements were part of a larger system. Dr. Blackwell has agreed to go on record with us. She's coming in tomorrow for a formal interview. What about the patients who were harmed? I asked. Are we reaching out to them? Carefully, Marcus nodded. Our legal team is involved to ensure we don't compromise patient privacy while still telling their stories. As the meeting continued, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. We need to talk. Just you and me. The boathouse at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. I hesitated, then replied simply, I'll be there. The park was nearly empty as dusk fell. My father sat on the same bench where I'd met Dr. Blackwell, looking out at the water. He'd aged a decade in just days, his shoulders hunched, gray hair disheveled, the confident surgeon replaced by a broken man. You came, he said as I sat beside him, maintaining a cautious distance. What do you want, Dad? To explain, I suppose. Not to justify. I'm past that now. But to help you understand how someone who started with good intentions ended up here. I remained silent, letting him continue. When I began my career, medicine was different. We focused on patients, not paperwork. As the system changed, more administrative oversight, insurance dictating treatments, declining reimbursements, I told myself the compromises were necessary to continue providing good care. He stared at his hands, the skilled surgeon's hands that had saved countless lives. The pharmaceutical relationships started small. They'd fund research I believed in, and in return I'd use their products when appropriate. But the incentives grew and the definition of appropriate became flexible. When did you know you'd crossed a line? I asked. There wasn't a single moment, he admitted. It was gradual, each compromise slightly larger than the last. By the time patients started experiencing unusual complications, I'd convinced myself it was coincidental. When colleagues raised concerns, I dismissed them as statistical anomalies. Dr. Blackwell tried to warn you. Many times, he nodded. I arrogantly believed I knew better. The money was substantial by then. Our lifestyle depended on it. Your mother's business, James's education, our standing in the community, all of it seemed worth protecting, at the expense of your patient's safety. Yes. The simple admission seemed to cost him physically. I've spent my life saving people, Serafina. The thought that I've also harmed them. His voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I recognize the courage it took for you to do what I couldn't, put principles above personal interest. I studied my father's face, searching for manipulation, but found only genuine remorse. What happens now? I've tendered my resignation to the hospital. The medical board will likely revoke my license. There may be criminal charges related to the insurance fraud. He spoke clinically, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I've instructed Charles to cooperate fully with all investigations and to establish a fund for affected patients using my retirement savings. And Mom, James, your mother is struggling to adjust to our new reality. We'll need to sell the house, downsize significantly. As for James, I've told him to distance himself from me professionally. With his talent, he can recover from this if he's not weighed down by my mistakes. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, my father turned to me. I know I've lost the right to ask anything of you, but I hope you'll consider maintaining a relationship with your mother and brother. They're angry now, but they'll come to understand you did what was right. And you, Dad, where do we go from here? He smiled sadly. That's entirely up to you. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But I hope someday we might find a way back to some version of family. As I walked home alone that night, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had changed in just a few days. I'd lost the security of my family as I'd known it, but perhaps gained something more valuable: the knowledge that I could face an impossible moral choice and choose integrity no matter the personal cost. The story broke in the Boston Investigator the following week. Medical betrayal. How pharmaceutical payoffs led to patient harm ran across the front page with my byline prominently displayed. Dr. Blackwell's testimony formed the backbone of the piece alongside anonymized patient accounts and hospital records. The aftermath was both better and worse than I had anticipated. My father avoided criminal charges by cooperating fully with investigators, though he lost his medical license and was required to pay substantial restitution to affected patients. My mother filed for separation, unable to reconcile her image of my father with the reality of his actions. She moved to Providence to stay with her sister, refusing to speak to me despite my attempts to reconnect. James surprised me by reaching out after a month of silence. Over coffee at a neutral cafe, he admitted that he'd been angry not because I'd exposed our father, but because I'd had the courage to act while he had remained silent despite his suspicions. I've accepted a residency position in Chicago, he told me, a fresh start away from Dad's shadow. But I'd like to stay in touch if that's okay with you. More than okay, I said, relieved to salvage at least one family relationship. My career at the Boston Investigator flourished. The hospital fraud story won regional journalism awards and led to systemic reforms in how Boston hospitals monitored physician-pharmaceutical relationships. Marcus promoted me to senior investigative reporter, and my byline became associated with thorough ethical journalism. 6 months after the story broke, I received an unexpected visitor at my new apartment, my father. Thinner, grayer, but somehow more at peace than I'd seen him in years. I'm moving to rural New Hampshire, he told me as we sat awkwardly in my small living room. There's a free clinic there that's willing to let me volunteer in a non-medical capacity. It's a chance to serve patients without the temptations that led me astray. That sounds redemptive, I offered cautiously. I hope so. He hesitated, then pulled a small package from his pocket. I wanted you to have this. Inside was a warm fountain pen I recognized immediately, the one his own father had given him when he was accepted to medical school. Why are you giving me this? I asked, confused. Because it represents integrity, he said simply. Something I lost sight of, but you never did. You're the true heir to what this pen symbolizes. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. I'm proud of you, Serafina. I know that might sound hollow coming from me now, but it's true. You stood up for what's right even when it cost you everything. That's real courage. After he left, I sat holding the pen, thinking about the complicated legacy of family, how the people who shape us can also disappoint us, how love and betrayal can exist side by side, and how sometimes the greatest act of loyalty isn't blind support but holding those we love accountable. Today marks 1 year since the story that changed everything broke. My father works at that rural clinic in New Hampshire, finding purpose in service without prestige. My mother has finally begun speaking to me again, though our relationship remains fragile. James is thriving in Chicago, building a medical career based on transparency and ethical practice, lessons learned the hard way through our family's implosion. As for me, I continue to pursue stories that matter, uncovering truths that need to be told. The Matthews family will never be what it once was, but perhaps we're building something more authentic from the ruins. Relationships based on honesty rather than appearance, love tested by fire rather than convenience. The hardest lessons often come from those closest to us. Sometimes family loyalty means having the courage to hold up a mirror even when the reflection is painful to see. In the end, truth may bruise but secrets destroy. Thank you so much for joining me on this difficult journey of family betrayal and redemption. Has karma ever played out in your family in unexpected ways? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of standing up for what's right resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about the complex web of family relationships and the courage it takes to choose truth over comfort. Remember to share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most meaningful growth. Until next time, may you find the strength to choose integrity even when it feels like you're standing alone.